Well, President Trump is on the world stage again with questions about Russian election meddling and North Korea's missile launch capabilities looming large. Joining us now is Occidental College professor Caroline Heldman. Thank you so much for being here.
Good morning, Serene.
Good morning. We've sure seen a lot come out the past couple of days. The big meeting that everyone was talking about, of course, was yesterday between our president and Russia's President Vladimir Putin. Who do you think was the winner kind of coming out of this meeting, Professor?
I think it's pretty clear that Russia was the winner coming out of this for a few reasons. One is the symbolism of it, the fact that Donald Trump from the United States, right, the President of the United States, spent over 2 hours with the President of Russia. This is exactly what Putin wanted because it symbolically elevates him in a room full of world leaders. It elevates him to a specific stature. But the second is reason why I think Trump gave something to Putin is that he decided that they were going to do a working group together to address cyber hacks moving forward, which is, I think, a little similar to the FBI working with the mafia in order to address organized crime, in the sense that 17 agencies in the United States, intelligence agencies, have confirmed that there was Russian hacking in our election. So for Trump and Tillerson to come out and say, look, we're going to move past this without any further sanctions, without any negotiations about how Russia should pay for that, and instead saying, no, we're going to do a working group, it's clear that this meeting made Putin very happy.
And Secretary of State Tillerson came out and said, we pressed President Putin. How hard did he press, do you think? And will we ever really know? Because there were only about 6 people in this meeting.
And we won't know. And the secrecy is another issue. Of course, we want to know what happens in closed-door meetings with Russia, given their interference in our election and the threat that that poses to our democracy. And as you're noting, there were conflicting accounts, right? So some folks coming out and saying, Putin said it didn't happen and Trump accepted that. Other folks saying, no, he didn't accept that. We don't know how hard he pushed, but what we do know is that he agreed to a working group. That was the outcome of that meeting. Not sanctions, not some sort of move forward that would prevent this from happening in the future. And many election experts are saying that this opens the door for meddling in the 2018 elections.
Moving on, we know that President Trump met with President Xi of China today. And of course, a lot of pressure and all eyes right now on North Korea. What do you think we have to do in order to really stem a situation from getting out of control over there right now?
Well, bringing up China, I think, is the key. This is the Achilles heel of the Trump administration. As President Obama said it would be, it was for his as well. I think that Trump has to be cautious about doing nothing, and also about doing things preemptively, because it could escalate the situation. But at the end of the day, China is key, because our sanctions, our economic sanctions, which are the biggest, most potent tool we have against North Korea to contain their nuclear threat, simply haven't worked, because China has opened back doors, and about 85% of what is going in and out of North Korea is going through China. So I think that Trump really needs to sit down and put a lot of pressure on China in order to make sure those sanctions are being enforced. In addition to that, there are cyber attacks. Of course, there are military options, which hopefully would be the last option, since there's a riskiness involved in that, and you don't know where that escalation would end. But at the end of the day, we haven't seen anything yet. And if you'll recall, Otto Warmbier, Trump said that he would respond to that. He hasn't yet. So it's clear that this administration, like the previous administrations, is concerned but not sure what to do with North Korea.
Throughout the campaign, and even after he was elected president, a lot of critics said that international relations, foreign policy is not his strength. He's better on the economy, domestic issues. How do you think that he's done so far in painting himself as a world leader?
Well, he flubbed the first meeting internationally. He is doing far better, at least in terms of the ceremonial parts of what he's doing, although allowing your daughter to sit in, even though she is, a senior advisor, that role should typically go to the Secretary of State or one of the other high-ranking officials. So there have been some faux pas, but he did much better this time. And in terms of the domestic policy side, we have seen, although unemployment went up, job growth also has gone up. So there do appear to be some positive movements on the domestic front. He hasn't shown us yet what he can do internationally. But then again, for every president, there's such a steep learning curve, and especially for him. I mean, he came in with no military service and no previous government experience.
All right. Well, we'll see what happens next. Thank you so much, Professor. Nice to see you again, as always.